Hello, hello. Good morning, everyone.
Hey everybody.
Good
Hello and
morning.
welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. So let's just give a minute or two just while people joining in, as nobody ever joins those things on time, I wish. So there we are. I'm really excited. We had a lot of positive response to this topic. And I'd love to hear as well where you all coming from, what prompted you to join, what you want to get out of this. So you're welcome to share in a chat, in the comments as we go. It is a conversation, not a presentation. We will be sharing some visuals to illustrate some of our points, but it is a conversation that is for you. So feel free just to pop any notes and comments in a chat as we go. So yeah, so for those of you who are joining this for the first time, this is Human Performance at Work Leadership Forum. And I set this up because working as an organizational development consultant, I'm hearing a lot of questions and sometimes repeating questions from my clients, from the audiences that I'm speaking with, on all sorts of topics that kind of keep people, leaders, and business owners awake at night. And I just wanted to create a safe space for those questions to be heard and also to bring in some other experts to add different perspectives to my opinionated point of view on the world and add a little bit more richness to the dialogue and conversation. This topic specifically, again, I think we are now living at those really uncertain times and people are afraid. People are scared of tomorrow and what's happened next. People are afraid that AI are going to take their jobs. Business owners not sure what the business future are going to look like and how to communicate that to their employees. So there is a lot of uncertainty. So this topic is really and this question, and how do we communicate what the future looks like if we don't know what that future is ourselves? So I thought it's a great opportunity for us to explore and see where we are at on this. So the topic is how to communicate the story of AI transformation to your employees. And we do have to acknowledge that there are two sides to this narrative, right? There is this dark negative side to it where people are losing their jobs and there's a lot of fear and uncertainty, but there's also the positive future of it. And I take the view that we need to have that positive view over the negativity. And I choose to tell the positive story. I choose to engage with AI and technology in a way that serves me. And if we think that at this time, people want to know that your organization has a future in this uncertain world and that they have a place in it, so they feel safe in it. But for you as a business owner, as a leader, you don't want them just to have a place in your business. If they do have a place in your business, you want them to play a proactive part in shaping it and also adding value to creating that future. But people don't create from a place of fear. People don't innovate from a place of uncertainty. Therefore, our role as leaders is then to create that psychological safety and create environment from where people can contribute and add value and feel better and believe in that future vision of your business and your direction that you are taking them towards. And that's why I've chosen those two guests who are equipped with some tools and stories and narratives to be able to show you how exactly do we do that, right? How we take this messy world that we are in today and actually reshape this into a more positive narrative that gives people hope, that shows people that there is a better way and gives clear steps of how do we navigate that, how do we communicate to them. So yeah, so Gavin Dell, I had a privilege of seeing him speak recently. where he delivered some storytelling presentations, and I was really inspired by some of his frameworks and simplicity of these models that he has. And he's working to illustrate the impact for social enterprises, and he's got his own assessments for measuring that impact and then telling the story of that, which I'm sure all of you can learn from. And Will, he's a director at Jones+Palmer, and I had a privilege of working with Will last year when we had a culture change and employee experience redesign experience. And at the back of all that, created a kind of rebranded the entire company into what they call a tribe of storytellers. And there is at the back of that, there is a believability framework, like a science-backed up method that shows you how to bring people on board and how to win their hearts and minds through your communication. So we'll leave that as well to the very end, where we'll share that framework and some of those insights. But yeah, for those of you that haven't met Will and Gavin, Gavin, do you want to introduce yourself briefly and just share with audiences who you are and what you do, and why should they care to listen to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much. I'm not sure that I can do as good a job as yourself with that introduction, but I will try. So yeah, so my name is Gavin Dell. My background is in strategic project management and also revenue management and marketing. So I've worked at organizations such as TNT and FedEx and running projects across Europe for those. And what I found within the corporate world is that they were very data rich, but then they didn't know how to communicate their data very effectively. And so that's where, when I went to university, there was a module called data storytelling. And I just realized that this is the way to capture the hearts and minds of people, right? If you can kind of compare the story with the data, then you're kind of satisfying both hemispheres of the brain, and you are basically able to engage people and inspire them to take action. And so I've started my own business called Lead with Story. I've also got a CIC, a community interest company called Lead with Impact. And I've got such a passion for like social enterprises and charities and supporting them. But I found that they've got the total opposite challenge to the corporates, right? So they are story rich. They've got the most incredible stories. They lead with passion and with heart. A lot of the people that have founded the CIC, it's based on the fact that it's from lived experience, whether they've been through trauma or anything else. However, they don't have the data to kind of back it up. And so I kind of bridge the gap from both the social enterprise world as well as the corporate and private world. And yeah, I kind of provide presentations, workshops, modules, frameworks, and just help people to really communicate their value that they're having within the community projects. And I've also got a SaaS platform that I've built that just kind of simplifies the whole impact measurement and reporting. So that's me in a nutshell. Very happy to be here. Why you should listen to me? Yeah, I'm just here to kind of support from a storytelling, from a engaging audiences and engaging employees perspective. And I just think in a very strategic way, and hopefully I'll be able to bring some value to the
fantastic. Hopefully I can get some questions out of you in a way that shines the best light on what you do. So thank you. Will.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Evelina, and hello everyone. So yeah, I'm Will. I'm the Director of Consultancy at Jones+Palmer. We're a corporate communications agency, and we've been crafting believability now for 120 years. So that's quite an achievement. And I guess where believability comes into my role is I work with group level leaders, typically within listed companies, but we do go beyond to discover, define, and communicate to their network what their organization's unique economic opportunity is. So as Evelina said and wonderfully introduced me, we worked very closely for a year on transforming the Jones+Palmer brand, the works structure and organization, really in mind of the changes that we're seeing with AI and how the workplace is having to deal with emerging models and forces, and really identifying what is, I guess, left, which is the power of storytelling, which obviously has a huge role to play in influencing, motivating, incentivizing, and as Evelina said, if we're going to innovate and coordinate in a way that's optimistic and positive, it is the stories that we're going to be telling to each other and that we believe in that will allow that sort of progressive phase and that positive phase to, fingers crossed, emerge. Although, as we will probably debate, is what's the balance that has to come from that. So yeah, really happy to be here.
Great. Pleasure to have you here, Will, and thank you, Gavin, for being here. So to kind of give you a little bit of heads up of what you expect out of this conversation, I would like us to have a look at how we personally, as three of us, navigating this AI transformation, and then what we can extract out of this in terms of the mindset at individual level and stories that we have to be telling ourselves to be able to then navigate this change in a way that is it's going to translate into our success and not going to leave us as victims of circumstances and external environment. We'll then look at, in that context, what does this mean for leaders, and how can leaders inspire that kind of mindset and that positivity and that ownership and trust in our teams? And then we'll kind of go a level up. What does it mean for our organizations? And how do we need to communicate this entire story of future vision and transformation to our employees internally? But also we can touch on, if there is an interest on that, in terms of how do we communicate externally to our audiences so we actually attract potential right talent to our business. We attract right clients and investors and so on. So how do we need to show up? And then what's next in that? So we'll touch base as well on our kind of narrative strategy of the business. How do we communicating it internally, externally, and how can we utilize the science of storytelling to build the trust and to build psychological safety for people that they can kind of innovate from and add value to the business and not be left out in this amazing world of opportunity that we are facing right now. So yeah, so Gavin, how are you finding this time yourself? How are you utilizing AI for yourself, for your business? If we just kind of have like a very, very brief personal check-in to see how are you at this time and how are you making it work for you?
Yeah, so I'm using AI in the sense of, if there's any areas for increased productivity or efficiencies, this is where I'm trying to keep artificial intelligence in an area where it can kind of speed up activities, and anything that's a repetitive process is where I utilize artificial intelligence. What I've been super careful on personally is just to make sure then I'm not replacing my own thinking with that of artificial intelligence. I think it's really important to just make sure that when it comes to building of my business, building of any programs, I am making sure that the thought process is coming from like my own thoughts and ideas, and then kind of building on those then in terms of how to kind of build that out and to write things out. And then as well, from a impact reporting and measurement perspective as well, just making sure that it's doing the work that I would give to an intern or to somebody without it requiring too much brain work. So for me, in a nutshell, it's to drive efficiencies and also to drive productivity within the business.
Yeah, Will, before you actually answer your question, I actually want to share something quite interesting about Will from working with him. Will has actually moved his role several times, and he started as a creative, then he became a director of his creative department, then he moved to consultancy, and now he's actually also working in sales and more with clients. So Will is one of those people that he's very good at taking any challenge and any opportunity that's thrown at him and he's looking at adding value through that and creating something new at the back of those challenges. So I think there's a lot to learn from that mindset as well. So yeah, Will, how are you utilizing this time right now?
Yeah, so it's been, I mean, I'm generally energized by the opportunity, and that for anyone who's obviously on the call and Evelina who's worked with me knows that I think this is a really exciting time because of the opportunity. But I'm also very aware that it does at times feel like a bit of a race that feels like there's been started because of the same opportunity. Um, but I've been probably, it's got to be 2 years actively experimenting and deploying AI, originally for my own purposes to accelerate my research, thinking, delivery, while at the same time, because I've got a team to think about, is figuring out where the human impact mattered most to them. So we think of those 2 years, my team proactively use now a lot of private large language models that I've designed. They've designed some as well now, and they're deploying that in a system, which is fantastic. And the reason that works really well is we operate in quite a regulatory space. There's quite a lot of constraints, and time is one of them. So the things that we would love to achieve, quite often our clients want to go, I just can't deliver that. But with the productivity, as Gavin's just said, we can actually get a really great result. I mean, the client's like, I've just got to add 10, 20% to this. You've done the work for me.
Yeah.
So it's not the fact that you go, the team is having to do a load more work. Their judgment is critical, absolutely, and that question of taste. But the client is suddenly like, I can say yes to this improvement, this innovation, because it presented in front of me, and I'm happy with it, and I'm happy to put that bit of extra investment, and they feel like they get a greater return of investment. Our relationship gets stickier because of it. So there's been some wholesale benefits from my function for sure from that. Now, obviously, the last 2 years have been around large language models, as everyone's coining it. 2026 is the year of going agentic. So I'm now playing with that and experimenting with that. And again, when you look at the opportunity of that, I mean, I built 6 apps in a week. And I mean, I'm not saying they're completed articles, they're what you would call a minimal viable product. So it's a really good working prototype. But if we go back to the human bit storytelling, to present that prototype in a room is no longer me going, here's the theory, please buy into me. I'm like, look at what it does. And because it's so tangible and they can connect the dots because it's real, the ability to then say, yes, I will invest in your idea or whatever, or please take it to the next stage becomes far more compelling. And I think that's really powerful because you can just engage the room in a real-time way.
But you're highlighting here is also a very important point that actually it's not, it's the amplification of the human potential, right? And like Gavin mentioned before, it's not about using AI to replace you. It's actually looking at how can you enhance your abilities. And for that, it's very, very important that we give people tools and knowledge and training to understand what AI even is and how to use it properly, because people are always afraid of things that they're not familiar with, right? If you don't know something, if you can't understand it, you'll be just the nature of how human nervous system responds to it, you will be cautious and you're not going to be engaging with that. And just putting, ChatGPT or, any other chat in front of people is not enough. You need to explain to them what GPT even is, right? What does it stand for? What these letters stand for? Do you know? What does it mean in terms of the system that it does? What is the latest technology in AI and evolution? And what is possible for creating it? So you're creating this kind of vision of options and future possibilities, and then inspire people to dream, and then give them tools to say, actually, you know what? A while ago, you could dream and it was not possible to build that dream. Now you can have it. You can have tools that will allow you to execute. So for me, for example, I had a team before, and obviously it costs a lot to have human team who are constantly researching, doing analysis, doing even administrative tasks and so on. Now I can actually replace a lot of that with virtual assistants, and I have an assistant who checks my emails, who sends sets calendar appointments, who does my research, who moves files and tidies up my folders and reminds me, what I need to do for the day. And for me, that's really valuable because I'm not good at admin. So I can outsource that to AI and I have more space for these human conversations. I see
And
Nimisha is
and
here in a call, and yesterday we had a call with her, and she was saying like how nice it is that you just have a random coffee chat with someone virtually without any agenda. And I can only spare the time to have those human conversations because I've outsourced all of that. And I can then show other organizations how to do that. Yeah, Gavin, sorry, go on.
yeah, no, thanks. And I think a lot of the fear though comes from the fact that when they talk about AI and then replacing those tasks, they then think then that means that people are losing their jobs and they are being replaced. And I think that's where a lot of the fear comes from. However, there's also a different way to reframe that, because if you've got the people within your organization that are not doing the repetitive tasks that are adding no value to your business, then what you can then do is to refocus the people within the team to now work on value added tasks. And I think that's really important in terms of the clarification. So when we talk about utilizing AI to replace, it's not the person as much all the time. I mean, in some cases, unfortunately, it is. However, it's actually around like, how can we make sure that the thing that we've got our people focused on are actually adding value to the organization? It's not just calendar entries, data input, all the stuff that can be replaced. And I think from a human element, that's something that's at the forefront of people's minds.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
think,
Because if you
yeah,
look at if AI can do all of that, what did you do? What can you do? How can you add value? And I
yeah,
think it is so, so important that the way we communicate as leaders, we are actually inspiring people to think bigger, dream bigger, and show that here are the tools to make more possible for you, rather than making them insecure about, AI can do what you do. It's like, no, no, no. This is a good thing that AI can
yeah,
do what you can do, because now you can step up, you can learn, you can explore other areas, opportunities, skills, and it is really exciting place to be. But to get people to that place from where they can be excited and innovating from it, we need to inspire them with that possibility and
that's
equip
right.
them with knowledge of this is what these tools are for, and this is what possibilities and options are. So
Yeah.
yeah, I know, Will, you have also really interesting kind of take on kind of being director of your role. Do you
Yeah.
share your perspectives on that?
Yeah, so I think from looking how the technology is starting to play out, and I think it's probably worth just going back a second where you just go, actually, AI at this current point, or these technologies, they do not operate with common sense. So even if you look at the greatest types of AI developed, like AlphaGo, that then it became it solved protein folding, and now that's open share for the whole world. For that to be understood that it was completed, it still required a team of expert humans to validate that it had achieved protein folding. So even if we take this to a simple task, which is not globally world changing, like we go back to our own businesses and our roles, and you look at some of the people we've hired, if they're deploying AI, they still have to validate that the goal's been achieved. And I think that's a really important aspect first. I think the mindset shift that we need to start educating our teams on is at the moment they believe, well, they probably are at this point, and there's a hybrid that'll emerge before I see a shift, is that they're accountable for executing tasks and they own those operational things that we put within our job descriptions and what we measure them on. And I think what's going to happen as companies find novel ways, whether they emerge because the companies make it easier to purchase or we develop our own, and you can create your own agents to do various exercises for you, as both Evelina and Gavin has illustrated. We're all going to have to elevate to being like director of our function. So, if you speak to a lot of programmers who are in the thick of the tech world, most of them haven't touched a line of code for 18 months. So they went from being programmers who were responsible for programming, now they're the director of their own mini function. So where obviously AI can show up meaningfully in your role there is a mindset shift which you have to become more like a director of your function. You'll be managing maybe potentially various agents doing tasks. But at the same time as anybody who is in that leadership role, you will still have to work with a human who is a director of their function. So that network, the human skills, plus the ability to obviously deploy and do the value add as we're discussing, is going to create some interesting tensions, because from what we've been learning, agents have a very old school hierarchical approach. They don't mind, they don't go to bed, they don't have any of these issues, they will just execute. So you can be really direct and give absolute clarity and they will go and execute. But that's not how humans operate. So when we then have to step back, we still have to influence, motivate, incentivize, and win hearts and minds when we deal with other leaders, and here's the thing, everyone will sort of become like a leader, which then goes what sort of training is involved there. So I work with a lot of enterprise level organizations, and my sort of, I guess, prediction as I look at going down to SME is some of the challenges I see them have, will they eventually become the same sort of challenges of complexity and coordination at even SME level, because actually you're going to have lots of these almost like virtual members of staff doing your bidding, running various tasks, creating value. But at the same time, how does the ultimate leader in the business coordinate their teams of directors to make sure that there's coordination and you're all heading towards the same goals, strategy, etc.?
Yeah, so I think that in this context, let's look at what does it take for individual to have that approach and to have that mindset to kind of succeed through this, right? If we're looking at, if you are coming from this place of a victim and I'm just afraid that AI is going to replace me, that's not, then probably that's exactly what's going to happen, right? Because if you believe that's the case, you're not going to be creating, you're not going to be innovating, you're not going to be directing your own little function and creating outputs in a way then that adds value to the company and proves that they should keep you. So what are some of these stories that we need to be telling to ourselves first? What is the self-talk at individual level that we need to be first directing to ourselves, that then we can look at how leaders can shape that self-language? So what's the language of self-talk, Gavin? And any thoughts on that?
Wow.
I know you do have plenty of thoughts on that. Yeah, so I can't wait to hear.
I mean, I can give you a personal example, right? So I had a very small but mighty team when I was working at a company called KSI Medical. And we were a very data-driven team. And I remember sitting in front of my team saying, guys, ladies and gentlemen, our goal is to make ourselves redundant, right? Because we want to move at such a pace that what we want to do is anything that's a repetitive task, we want to just make sure that it's automated and we make that role redundant, right? And so what that did was a shift of our mindset to be able to say, right, okay, let's automate where we can, let's measure where we can. But we was just working at such a level where it was constantly, how do we think out of the box? How do we accelerate? And how do we improve? And to this day, that is still one of the best teams that I've worked with. And we literally had 4 people in the team, but the pace that we was executing project was just phenomenal. And so I think that from that experience, and you and I have had conversations about this, Evelina, I always say to myself, like, how are we prompting our own minds in terms of, like, what are our core beliefs? What is it that's driving us in terms of a mission? Look, when it comes to prompt engineering with regards to artificial intelligence, you have to be very specific in terms of, right, this is the outcome that we want, and this is how we want you to format it. And these are all of the inputs that are very specific that's going to influence what comes out as a result. Whereas a lot of the time, from a human perspective, the prompting that goes on in our own minds are like that negative, oh, I don't know if I'm going to achieve this. Actually, it's from a scarcity and from a fear perspective a lot of the time. And so, from a leadership perspective, I think that we have an ownership to be able to support people to prompt their own mind. we need to be able to say to them, right, this is the transition we are going through as an organization. This is the role that you play. And we need to map it out for everyone to say, right, this is exactly the role you're playing. This isn't a role to replace you. This is a role to enhance the work that you're doing and to improve the productivity that you can do. And so I just think from a leadership perspective, especially, we've just got so much work to do because, you know, there is a lot of scarcity out there, and some of it is valid, but I think we have got a role to play to really support people along that journey.
I love this, Gavin, because again, as you know, my background is in behavioral neuroscience, in therapy, and always looking with kind of working with people's minds and their belief systems, right? And whether you believe that you will win or whether you believe that you will fail, that's right. Whatever you believe, that's what's probably going to happen, right? Because that becomes your operating system from which you act on and from which you create results. So it's definitely this engagement with AI changes our relationship with ourselves. And if our job changes, if our roles are changing, if our sense of identity for who we are, and even what's the purpose of work, right? If AI can replace a lot of our work and our identity as a human species is very closely defined with this is who we are and this is the way we work, what does it mean for our sense of kind of coherence and sense of that identity and how it translates to the motivational drives in terms of what we're planning to do here? And when we interact with AI, a lot of, as you both kind of referred to, that the emotional labor of leading AI becomes irrelevant, right? When you lead people, you need to consider, somebody who hasn't slept because they have a baby at home, somebody who's going to be upset by the comment that you made, somebody who's going to be overloaded, tired, emotional, for whatever reasons. We actually have to manage that as leaders, right? When you're managing your agents, your digital employees, that is not a consideration. You can be strict, direct, and you don't have to worry about offending anyone because AI will not cry, right? So there is that emotional load that is taken away from us. But the cognitive labor goes through the roof because now you're suddenly directing people who have, multiple PhDs with IQ of 190, right? So you try to now lead these kind of people who are, like Steve Jobs was saying, like, I want to recruit people who are way more intelligent than me. So, I can give them the vision, but they can tell me the execution and and what to do and how to do it, right? So that's the thinking that we need to have in terms of, okay, what is the human container, the vision, the purpose, the intention that I need to feed, and then how do I utilize all of these resources for me to get there? And a lot of people, you speak to them saying like, yeah, here you go. I'm going to give you a team of 20 agents with 20 employees with IQ of 180 who have multiple PhDs. Can you think of any good case scenario of what you could do with that? And believe it or not, a lot of people go, no, I can't think of anything. I'll just wait for somebody else to tell me what to do. And I think this is the biggest risk. If you have that kind of mindset and you think that you're still going to wait for somebody else to tell you what to do and direct you, then you will lose your job and then you will lose in the situation. We really have to take that ownership to say, actually, now everything is possible, and the how is about upskilling with those tools and making sure that we as a collective of the organization, the brand, the business that you are leading, working towards the same goals, but you empower people with a how and bring their own innovation and imagination. So yeah, emotional labor goes down, but cognitive labor goes up, which that means that people who are directing it are actually overwhelmed themselves, and the relationships within the business between humans can be affected by that. So we do really need to kind of ramp up our ability for this cognitive thinking, for strategic thinking, and also entrepreneurial thinking. Every person needs to be able to think like, I'm running my own little business here, right? It's not enough just to be an employee. You need to think as if you are directing your own little enterprise here, and you're constantly innovating, testing, learning, and you are constantly looking, how can I add value to this business that employed me and that are paying me, so I can demonstrate that I'm adding value, and therefore I have a role to play in the future. Yeah, Will, what does it all mean for leaders, right? When you communicate this to the teams, when we're looking at in a market space, communicating with our kind of wider audiences, how do we need to show up? How do we need to communicate to inspire this kind of thinking and this kind of sense of agency and sense of entrepreneurship in every individual that we lead?
Well, we're having some really good open conversations because we've got a mix of where natural language obviously plays a really key role in adoption. So we have a part of our business which is very much in different software. It's very technical, would be the way I would describe it. And although AI will come along and start being part of their function, it hasn't yet quite landed in a way that, say, for my team, it has 2 years ago, and we've really embraced it because we work a lot with the written word. So when you've got a large language model that can take written word and do all these incredible things, the amplification has been quite fast. We can measure it, and it's been wonderful. But we've got a lot of concerned people, as rightfully so, going back to this bit, will I lose my job? Am I going to be replaced? All this sort of thing. And the conversations we've had, and I guess, it's appropriate, it's about AI, but it's about, I think, first of all, providing people with resources where they can serve their own algorithm better. So, it's very easy to, social media feels all this dystopia. We've all watched Black Mirror or The Terminator, whatever it is, and we go, this is it. All these terrible movies we watched, it's all going to come real. But the flip side of it is actually you could be feeding yourself with all this amazing research that the Google teams are doing. The fact that we can now we can predict forest fires in a way we've never been able to, flooding. What they can do now, understanding the pace of when a pandemic can appear. People are now like going, we know what the rainforest is thinking because we've started attaching various sensors with AI. So there's so many resources out there, which is about the positive and societal benefits that AI is utilizing for, charities, you name it. And I think that's probably the first bit to sort of get people to start to feel like they just calm down a little bit. The anxiety levels drop because there's some good in the world that starts them to think about it being a more inspiring type of movement rather than something that's going to come away and just erode everything. Then I think the other part of it is remembering that AI is wonderful because it can be deployed anywhere. But if we go back to judgment, every single person is a specialist in their own right. So you've got to ask your team, like, what are the problems or pains that always just nudge you, they grind your gears, and then go, well, have you asked AI to just focus on that maybe one thing? Like, if that's the one problem, it could be a small problem, but how would it go at removing that? Like, if that's my goal, help me do that. And every day you just go, what's the one thing I could do to replace that? And eventually you might say you need to build an app, or it gives you an idea and you go, wow, how do I do that? The great thing is it'll give you all the instructions. So again, this idea is you've got all that expertise, as Evelina said, you've got brains the size of planets at your fingertips, and you can just go ahead and deploy them as you see fit. So what I've tried to do is just get the team to do what I call a bit of painstorming. So not what's the opportunity, because that can feel too much like a leap for those who aren't maybe feel they're innovatively minded, but they can tell you where all their pains are. So when you get those on the board and go, how do we solve those pains? And and it's not always, but could AI be part of solving that problem? And you just see people go, hadn't thought about it quite like that. And then it's, as I said, it's allowing them to go away and as Evelina said, give them the tools, don't just drop them in front of it. And obviously that's the challenging bit with this, because actually it is about, you will have to show people how to prompt. It is a skill set. People joke Googling is a skill, and this is no different. So, it's one of those.
And again, if I jump in that, will as you remember, for the work that we did for the culture change for employee engagement, we have utilized AI to process the data, to analyze information, to hear all the voices, to have suggestions. But also the time that it takes, obviously we spend kind of days talking about it and so on. And then when you create your own vision of what you're gonna have, when you present it to employees, they're not there yet. Their mindsets are not there yet, right? There's always a gap to bridge between, okay, this is what the future gonna look like, and they look at it like, no, I don't get it. Like, I don't see how you extrapolated this reality from my reality of what I'm having and what I'm experiencing. So I think it's so important to be able to use that storytelling to kind of meet people where they are, create that safe space, hear their concerns, but then from that space, take them to, okay, I hear you, I understand you, this is all valid and reasonable, but look what else is possible. Let's find a way, let's find a how. And the coaching approach is really useful. Coaching as a leadership tool becomes more and more valuable because we have all the answers, but we need to have humans to ask better questions, right? And this is in terms of AI. And again, even when we do prompts, as you know, we've been feeding prompts to AI that are like 2 pages long, right? Because you're giving context, you're giving meaning, you're giving your purpose, you're giving your direction, you're giving ethical framework within which to operate, right? So I think very often we take for granted that AI will give the answers based on what we feed in. And if you are not happy with the results, actually it's not AI's fault. It's that we are missing some sort of knowledge, some piece of context, some piece of prompt engineering where we actually don't know how to get that result out of it. So even
Evelyn,
yeah, go on.
Sorry, just to jump in on that, because I think you've touched on a great point there, and especially when it comes to kind of the whole storytelling element, and then how we kind of take employees and people through that journey. And so something that I teach, especially when it comes to kind of storytelling and frameworks, is that especially as business owners and business leaders, we are not the hero of the story. And I think that's so important to remember. And if we then, as leaders, think about the journey that our employees are on and that our clients are on and put them as the hero, then it takes a totally different context, right? So if you think, for example, of any film and you think of that hero journey that they go on, like they've got a challenge that they need to overcome. They're going to go through a transformation between where they are now versus where you want them to be, which is exactly what you just described. And so then we need to see ourselves almost as like the Yoda or the Mr. Miyagi of the story, right? We need to be the person that's guiding the hero through that transition and helping them to get through to the other end. And so whether that obstacle or that conflict is to do with the fear that they feel because what's going on with my job, if it's there's a knowledge gap between where you want to be versus where you are today, our role as leaders is to help them go through that transition. Yeah. And whether that's to do with education, whether that's, as William said, with regards to teaching them the skill set of prompt engineering, we need to equip them with the resources and the tools to then say, right, we are going with you on this journey and we're going to help you to overcome your obstacles, your conflicts and your challenges. And then that ultimately should help them to get through that transformation. Yeah, and so I think, it's just really important that we kind of get those.
I'm going to flip this now that you said, because you can actually take this too far, right? And now if you look at the recent legal case study where, Meta, Google has been found guilty for causing harm by creating algorithms that are addictive and harmful for human behavior. So this is taking that kind of, if you want to say, abusing that human behavior and the science of storytelling to extreme, where now person is not feeling in control anymore, right? You are controlling the narrative, you are taking them on the journey, and you have taken all sense of empowerment and sense of agency from people, right? So I think this is really also important lesson on looking at, okay, so where is that balance? How can we take them on a positive journey? And from the place of communications, when we look at this, like this case is just the beginning of organizations being held more and more accountable for their impact of their actions on people's health, on their sanity, their quality of life. And it becomes even more important that at this stage, we as leaders, we take an active role in shaping the narrative, shaping the story, because people don't want to just, tag along on just do the job for the sake of money. The world wants meaning and connection and purpose. They want role models that they can look up to and know that, you as a leader are going to do the right thing for the future of humanity. So they want to follow you versus somebody else and work for the company. So at this time of change and transformation, we need a new narrative strategy. We need people, leaders, and owners to communicate the purpose of the business. Like, what is the purpose of the business in the future? What is the clear vision of that? And be very transparent about how we're going to get there, and then empower people to believe that they can actually shape that. They can be heroes in that journey, in making that reality. So I think it's really, really important to kind of do that.
There's an awareness piece as well, Evelina, because if we're saying now that most companies that I know have embraced agentic are going, well, I don't need to buy the software, we'll build it ourselves. If you look at this Meta case, it was more built around the intentional design choices that hijack the mind, the dopamine reward system. So if we're not aware of we go, well, I built this app, isn't it great? But actually we're not aware of the techniques. So for example, infinite scroll, autoplay, we ask it to build some sort of algorithmic reinforcement loop. Then companies need to be aware that the compounding effect of that, potentially based on a case like this, and I'm fast forwarding many years, this is a very progressive view, does the employer suddenly become culpable because they've created a bespoke piece of software that's leveraging these techniques that, if you're not educated on and understanding that you're tapping into something that's quite into people's limbic systems, etc., then actually you've got a problem.
Yeah, that's where understanding the human nervous system and how humans operate, how we work, how we navigate, how we think, how we feel is so, so crucial, because we have to take that in consideration of our communications and of our strategy. Because if not, we can cause harm unintentionally. It's not that intention of, Meta was to get some teenager to take their own life, right? Nobody designs with that in mind. It's a unintentional consequence of us saying, okay, I want this algorithm to keep people on the platform so I can sell more because they're viewing more ads and so on. But that's where this human judgment and this ethical connection becomes really, really important. And we really need to communicate that to people, that, the way we use this technology has to be responsible, and we take ownership and responsibility as leaders to give them a safe framework for how we do that. So Will, you do have an amazing framework for that we've worked on as part of our brand innovation and development, that looks at this believability and what are these ingredients and layers that you need to be able to inspire people to do just that. So so if we have 5 minutes of showing some visuals of that framework, and then we'll have a couple of questions at the end.
Hopefully everyone can see that, and that's loaded up. Brilliant. So obviously storytelling is our superpower. So hopefully we've landed that in this conversation as well. So the big questions that obviously we're working with my team personally, and this is something obviously I would say to Evelina, be good to share. We know in AI and agentic world, the question is, where will my value sit in the future? So this is our believability pyramid that Evelina obviously was part of helping us develop and create. And basically, if you want to be investable, so whether that's capital, ideas, resources, you name it, whether you're an employee, investor, so on, you have to work through this stack. So you can't just be inspiring and not backed up with credibility and clarity. So the idea is you've got to be understandable. You back that up with credibility. That's topped up with being inspiring. You generate belief, and then someone will be compelled to take action. They choose to invest. So with this, I've made sure that we deploy this obviously for this call. And for me, it's just to walk through that at the understandable layer. I generally think now that AI can easily augment this layer. So it will be human supported, but AI can pretty much make anything understandable now. You have to deploy a bit of judgment, hence the human supported. You have to have some expertise of what good is, but fundamentally, AI can now just take that layer away quite comfortably. Credible, now this idea of being credible, I believe now is a shared space. So we can ask our AI to give us some data analysis, we can ask where it's referenced that, and we can cite the sources and check the quality of those. But in regards to credibility of lived experience, our own context and accountability, it can't touch. And obviously from a human to human perspective, people by people still. So that is now a shared space. And as we go up to the top of inspiring, I still believe this is a human-led but AI supported at best layer. So this is a place where we still get to fundamentally own, and that is ours. We've all seen AI can simulate inspiration very well, but it doesn't carry any conviction intent, and you certainly can't follow it anywhere. So, in regards to what people trust and advocate for your own value, that top bit now is really something we all have to, I think, work very hard and invest in, while at the same time not forgetting we have a wealth of experience and knowledge that can really fill out that credibility block, and then the AI can help support and underpin that. And then, as we went to the beginning of this call, that's the amplification story. So that's how our model maps into this really well in regards to storytelling. And then obviously the bit I wanted to obviously share is a lot of us probably think about our own value for a very professional lens. And I like to talk to my team members especially more on a one-to-one basis around what their talent stack is. And the reason I believe that's going to be more important now is because there is an emerging model that's starting to appear. But the sort of things I ask people in these situations to think about is what roles they've had, professionally, any experiences outside of work, and they can look at that, and what challenges they've had to overcome. And the questions that allows them to think about is, what did it give them? How did it shape their own judgment? And how does it influence the decisions today? And that's the really important bit, because we're in the here and now. So what that means then, and I got to work on a fabulous report, or support the report, sorry, which was about non-linear careers with the ACCA. So we got to work with them as they're one of our clients. And there's this it's more around professional services and obviously the financial services, but the data is very compelling, which is basically non-linear careers are slowly going to become a thing of the past. I coined them squiggly careers because that's just far more fun. But it's the ability to go, what's the combination of skills, experience, and perspectives, and the fact that we are going to be going through careers based on our impact. So what's the story of what I solved? Not what was my job, what company did I work at, what did I solve for a particular person of influence, a leader, a team, whatever it is. Now, anyone who's done a good interview, hopefully you've introduced those, but that's going to be right at the top of the order now, not you worked for this company and this was your job role. So for me, just to contextualize that, this is my own talent stack. So what you would see on a typical CV is, as Evelina said, I started life as a graphic designer. They gave me visual thinking. I then became a creative director, conceptual, narrative, and then consultancy director. So that's strategic framing and stakeholder understanding. The bit that then obviously gets a few laughs, but I think is really important, is I have a really diverse set of things that I've done outside of what would be expected on my CV, but this probably wouldn't appear on my CV based on the traditional model, which was I prepped furniture. But I could say that gave me attention to detail. There was patience involved in craftsmanship. I was a milkman for many years, but there's discipline, understanding routine, and customer service. I have a city in guilds. It's ancient, but I can do car audio installation. So that's system thinking and technical problem solving. And I once was a basketball coach. So, the qualification probably needs updating by now, but that gave me some early doors leadership, how to motivate, and you're reading people in real time. So you look at that and go, that's interesting, but the outcome is no longer about the jobs. So if AI is amazing at generating all these options, it's about the point of view from all those experiences. And that's it. AI can't generate your lived experiences. And for me, it's when you start going, you sort of coalesce all those points of view, That's how I look at problems in a live environment, support a team, etc. So it's a useful exercise. It gives people a bit of a smile, but again, it breaks down those barriers because they think they've got to be just this professional thing. Like, I've been this and I've had a career in X, but actually it's about asking people, promoting, and really, and I think moving forward, we're really going to be asking people to try and bring their whole self to work, because that's a really rich thing. And there's a load of hidden value. Like, I think one of the best things I always enjoy is I still feel like I learn something new about somebody every day. In our business, we've got about 50 employees, and someone still surprises me because they said, "Oh, I do this at the weekend," and you're like, "Really?" But you suddenly go, "Wow, I've learned something new," and they have that capability and skill, and we bond over it. But it's, if you suddenly go, imagine that combined to the way they appraise something that is through AI or agentic, it becomes really, really powerful.
Amazing. Thank you, Will. Yeah, I think again, when we look at application of this, and how can you inspire every person to kind of look at their own identity and their own experience in a very different light, that has to become part of our communication. And like my kind of diagnostic approach to looking at organizations and how ready they are and equipping humans to upskill is really looking through these lenses of that we've used, as well as it's sitting within that believability pyramid of this kind of head, heart, hand, and hub model, right? So head is like, what do people know? What is the knowledge, data that we use to make choices and decisions on? What we don't know, what is missing? How can we utilize AI to complement that? The heart, this is all the emotional, interpersonal, emotional intelligence, relational space. How are people feeling? Can we meet them where they are? How do we want them to feel? And how can we take them on the journey to inspire them so they actually feel better and they believe in that better future? Then hand is all about action, right? So what do we want them to do? What are things that we are doing here? What could we be doing differently? What we are not doing? What we should be doing in the future? What are these tools that we can be utilizing to get things done better? And then when you combine all of these things, it goes to hub, collective intelligence. What is it that, how we are utilizing our head, heart, and hand to create the outputs that then add value to us as a company? What new innovative product solutions that we are creating? What are outputs that we're putting to our clients? How can we adding value to our community, as Gavin measuring those kind of social impact, right? What's the difference that we are making as organization, and how can we make people feel like they are on board on this journey and they are making the difference too, by being part of your organization, of your tribe, versus something else. So yeah, so I'm aware that we are half past. I'm happy to stay for a little bit longer and to answer some questions, but obviously this is kind of the end of the official time together. So before we run away, Gavin, will, if people want to hear more from you, if they want to connect, have access to what you do, what's the best way of reaching out to you? Feel free to share. Will has already posted his contacts in a chat. I'll share this with you as well when I share the recording. And Gavin, what's the best way for people to reach out to you as well?
Yeah, I'll drop it in the chat as well. But mine is Gavin at Lead with Story, or you can go on the website, leadwithstory.com.
Great, fantastic. So feel free to reach out to Will, to Gavin, and continue this conversation. And I am also offering conversations for leaders to explore your narrative strategy and how you are leading people through this change, how you are bringing them on board. That is specifically for your situation, for your vision of the future, and how do you translate that into your communication. So yeah, thank you, everyone. If you have any other questions, I'll stop the recording here. But if you have any other questions, any other comments, any suggestions, I'd love to hear what you're taking out of this and what you will do differently now. So thank you, everyone. If you want to, feel free to continue the conversation. And if not, then thank you and goodbye.
Excellent.
Thank you, everyone. Wonderful.
Thank you.